Hi, and welcome once again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today we're going to hear part one of a two-part article about what? Tests.
Yeah, who's really excited for tests? Well, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you a secret. I was always really good at tests. So I was really excited for them, and especially once the idea of testing curves were introduced. Nothing made me happier than taking a test on a curve.
Come out high on the curve. That's right. Okay. Well, today is September 26th, and we're on page 67 in your magazines. And here is part one of Testing Gets Personal. Ask someone what they think about tests, and you'll likely receive a frown in return. Tests, quizzes, and exams are usually viewed as causes of dread and anxiety. However, there's one type of test that people actually enjoy taking: personality tests. These are used to determine one's strengths, talents, or weaknesses, and the results often provide insightful takeaways.
Science-backed tests used to assess one's personality are believed to date back to the start of the 20th century. Some of the first assessments were used by the military to predict the impact war would have on soldiers. Other early tests were used by medical professionals to diagnose and treat various mental health issues. Over time, personality tests became standard practice in schools and workplaces to determine anything from the career path a person was suited for to which employees would be best for promotion.
In today's digital age, personality tests are more accessible than ever before. In the past, you might have been given a particular test by an employer or a doctor or as part of a study. Now, with the advent of the internet, you can spend hours online testing yourself to discover everything from your leadership style to which superhero your persona most closely aligns with.
Of course, most online tests are meant merely for fun, and people treat them as such. Yet, even tests that have been scientifically developed and approved have their limitations. In the U.S., judges have ruled that certain personality tests discriminate against some workers, such as those with disabilities. In addition, researchers have found that some assessments may lead people to draw conclusions that are not accurate. In other instances, an over-reliance on the results of personality tests may cause people to overlook weaknesses or strengths not indicated in the results.
Because tests are designed by humans, and we humans are fallible.
So, as a preview to what we will talk about today, Karen and I did take personality tests here, and I personally felt my results were strikingly accurate, like scary, creepy accurate. And the more I read about it, I read about other people that have similar personality types, such as I do, especially males. My personality type is very rare for a male.
Really?
Yeah, very rare. It's 0.5% for males.
No wonder it's so hard for women looking for a husband.
Women have only 1.5% of women have your personality type. So we have exceptionally rare personality types. And when I read about males that have my personality type, it was creepy because I was like, this dude sounds like me. Like, I feel like my wife wrote this post. It was bizarre. But one thing I will say, and there's a phrase I want to introduce here, is called the je ne sais quoi. It's a French term meaning there's a certain unknown something. And I think that's one thing that we should all remember when taking personality tests. Even as a person that felt, man, this test is accurate, there are certain just intangible things that are unknowable to a person, or why someone is so special or unique. There's a certain something that we can't put our finger on. And there's this French term, je ne sais quoi. That's a really useful term.
Yeah, it means there's something about it, but I can't tell you exactly what. Now, when you said that there are only 1.5% of women who have a personality similar to mine, I guess I was a little surprised, but not too surprised. An advantage of that is when you find other people in that 1.5%, it's very easy to make friends. And so over the years, people say, oh, it's so hard to make friends. I go, no, it's easy to make friends. All you have to do is find your tribe. You find those people in that 1.5% and you become friends immediately.
Yeah, what I saw is that women so Karen and I actually share this same rare personality, which is a bizarre thing. You have two people that have this bizarre, rare personality type.
Makes it fun to record together, though.
It does. It really does make this interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so testing gets personal. Very often testing should be impersonal, right? We're just testing your knowledge of math or your knowledge of chemistry or whatever. But now it's about who you are, and that is awfully personal. So our first sentence, ask someone what they think about tests, and you'll likely receive a frown in return. Now, I'm going to share a secret. They originally wrote a negative answer. Now, when I see a negative answer, that is the same as saying no. And this is not a yes-no question. So you can't say, how do you feel about tests? No. That's not an appropriate answer, and that's why we changed it to a frown in return. You hear it and you go, oh, yuck, tests.
That's right. When I pass out test papers to my students, they don't say no. They don't throw it. I'm not going to lie. A couple of them do try to hand it back to me. But that's strictly a comical reaction to what I'm doing. In fact, they're just kind of like, I don't want to do this.
Test again. I don't want to do this.
I have a teacher friend that if her students complain when she hands out the test, they get extra homework. So
they're careful.
This is so fun. No. So what they have to do is cheer. And so they'll hear these kids say, yay! And I always know they're getting a test. It's the funniest reaction.
That's hilarious. That's a great story. Our next sentence, tests, quizzes, and exams are usually viewed as causes of dread and anxiety. I think it's a little exaggerated in some cases, but if it is what we call a high-stakes test, it's a different matter. So high is just the opposite of low. Stakes is S-T-A-K-E plus S for plural. High stakes, that means a lot hangs on this test. If you get a good grade on the test, you get into a great university. If you don't get into a good university. That's a high stakes test. These are usually highly stressful and often kind of harmful to people in their development. But if it is just a quiz, it's actually very useful in learning because it points out what you need to work on.
I really like our two words here. We have dread and anxiety. So anxiety is pretty easy. It's just nervousness. The adjective dread here, actually this is a noun here, dread, we anticipate fear. So before the scary thing happens, you know it's going to happen. When you watch a scary movie, they're slowly walking in the forest. It's very dark. You know the scary killer's there waiting for you, but you didn't see them yet. That feeling is dread. This is a great adjective.
Right. It means great fear.
Great noun. I keep saying adjective is a noun.
It's a noun. That's right. Dreadful is the adjective.
Thank you.
So a lot of people are afraid of tests, but note that although these three words all mean tests, they're different kinds of tests, they're different levels. So exams sounds like the most serious, and often we'll say entrance exams for universities. Quizzes is the shortest kind, the least threatening, and for me, in my classes, I give lots of quizzes, but I almost never count the grades toward their final grade. All they have to do is improve. And test is somewhere in between. It's more general. Okay, our next sentence. However, there's one type of test that people actually enjoy taking, personality tests. Now, when social media first became popular, started becoming popular, people were taking these tests all over the place, and clever marketers were collecting a lot of personal information about people, and people weren't suspecting it because they loved taking these personality tests. They just gave away a lot of their data for free.
That's exactly right. When people... Initially, you could take them for free. And then once, just as Karen mentioned, once the marketing teams recognized how popular these were and how easily they went viral, they said, you could take this quiz, but you have to promise to sell your data. And they made this completely legal. And They gathered up lots of information. And there were quizzes, when I recognized what was happening, I actually would deny ones that I was very interested in. And, do I regret missing out on that quiz? No, but there were some fun quizzes that my friends were talking about, and I was not willing to participate in. But a lot of them, there's free versions out there if you're that into doing personality tests. For example, I took my friend's character quiz and I got Rachel, which I don't know what that means. I never watched the TV show Friends, but I got Rachel. So Taiwanese like the show Friends, so I was true. Rachel. You could take it, whatever that means to you.
And I wanted to mention a really funny verb that's mostly British. If they're collecting lots of data and it's very easy and it's happening very fast, we can say they hoovered it up. Hoover is a brand name for a vacuum cleaner. It's also the usual verb for vacuuming the floor in British English. Oh, I have to hoover the floor. So if they're hoovering up data, it's just like they're sucking it in really fast. Hoover is H-O-O V-E-R, and add ed for the past tense. They've hoovered up data really fast. Okay, our next sentence. These are used to determine one's strengths, talents, or weaknesses, and the results often provide insightful takeaways. Takeaways are things that you learn from an experience that have some kind of value to you. These are the takeaways. If you forget everything else, just remember these 3 takeaways, the things that you can go home and remember and use. So to determine means to decide or to find out. Your strengths, the things you're good at. Your talents, the things you're naturally good at, like maybe you're really good at art or music. And also your weaknesses, things that you're not so good at. Although I have to mention that people who are really good at these things, they usually tell you it's not so much about talent. It's really about how hard you work at it.
Insightful takeaway feels like a stretch to me for most of these personality tests.
I
but
agree.
The real meaningful tests, then yeah, I think there are things to be learned or perhaps certain insights that are useful.
So I took the test that Chris took to help prepare for this lesson, and I believe that I have already taken that test before or something very similar. When I was answering the questions, I was very conscious of my answers. It wasn't like they were sneaking information out of me. So when the results came out, I was not terribly surprised because I was aware of the information I was giving out.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I actually asked several of my colleagues to take this same personality test because I know them fairly well. I work really closely with these people, and I wanted to see, because I felt this personality test was so accurate, would it also be accurate for them? And my one colleague asked me, should I take this how I want to be or how I am? And I had to instruct this person, take it as you are. It's not a value judgment. No one's going to say good or bad things about you.
Right.
Everyone has this mix of good or bad in you. No one's perfect and no one's all terrible. So just take it as you really are. Be intellectually honest with yourself and approach this and see if it's accurate. Strictly, I asked him to do it because I wanted to see the results I felt very accurate for me. Would that carry over to several individuals? And then I would feel more confident in the results.
That's right. And I find that especially interesting because maybe it isn't such a surprise that Chris and I got very similar results because we have similar personality types, at least in some areas. But the people that Chris works with, they have quite different personalities.
Yeah, I agree. So Karen and I mentioned before the start of the program that I think, Karen, no matter where we ended up in the world, we would end up in education. I think we just were always going to be educators. That path was always set for us.
Yep.
But there are a lot of guys in Taiwan, and this is not a dig at them. This is not a criticism. There's a lot of guys in Taiwan that are in education, teaching maybe in cram schools. I'm a cram school teacher. So this is not a dig at cram schools. That there are a lot of teachers that are there strictly because it's the best job they could get in Taiwan. But that was the case for women for a very long time. Education was by far the best job they could get for a very long time.
Right.
And no one would say those women were doing a bad job. They were making good economic decisions for their family. And what's wrong with that?
That's right. A lot of foreigners here do end up with needing a job, needing an income, and they haven't necessarily studied like literature or language before. But here they are, they're a native speaker, so they get hired, and they may not really enjoy it that much. It's not their thing. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. They're probably very good at something else. They'd be probably very good working at with computers or something. But, here they are, and we need native speakers, so they're not as enthused about their job as we are.
Well, how many engineers from some country moved to the United States and became a New York cabbie because it was the best job they can do?
That's right.
No one would look down on them. They were paying their kids tuition. They were sending their kids to college. Is that not an admirable thing to do?
Absolutely. Okay, let's continue.
Science-backed tests used to assess one's personality are believed to date back to the start of the 20th century.
Okay, now we're trying to trace the history of these tests.
Some of the first assessments were used by the military to predict the impact war would have on soldiers.
And that's important to know because if your soldier goes into combat and completely freaks out, he's not going to be a very effective soldier.
That's right. Other early tests were used by medical professionals to diagnose and treat various mental health issues.
And I have to mention here that although psychiatry is a recognized branch of medicine, we still don't really know what we're doing with psychiatry. They have revised this book of psychiatric disorders many times. They've decided, this is not actually a disorder. This is just something else. Honestly, with psychiatry, there's a lot of stuff where we really don't know what we're doing.
Over time, personality tests became standard practice in schools and workplaces to determine anything from the career path a person was suited for to which employees would be best for promotion.
This reminds me of an aptitude test that I took back in elementary school, I would say around 7th grade, which would be equivalent to junior high. And I got pretty good scores in a lot of things, but I got a 40% on one area, clerical. I thought, my father ran a business and he would often have me help with the books and I always did a bad job at it.
That's funny.
That is not my area of aptitude, clerical. That means just keeping track of numbers and records and things. I should not be doing that kind of work.
So as we discussed earlier, Karen and I have a rare personality type and we have very similar goals in many ways. When I took the GRE, this is when you want to go to graduate school, you need to take an aptitude test. So I scored in the top 6 percentile for language.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then I scored in the bottom 25 for math.
Oh, Isn't I prepared the math. I did okay.
I did too. I prepared for the math. I knew my math was weak. I knew I was going to struggle. So I performed exceptionally well in the top 10% in the entire world on the GRE in language and writing, vocabulary. When it came to math, bottom 25. Which one do you think all of my friends focused on?
Well, I can guess. But I have to say that Taiwan is really good at giving you previous test questions to practice on. I practiced really hard with those, even though math is not my particular strength either, and I did okay.
I did terrible. Bottom quarter.
Okay, it's actually kind of typical.
All right, before we move on, this second paragraph is talking about science-backed tests that we use to assess personalities or careers, etc., etc. Before this, there were other personality tests, and probably you might know about phrenology. You might have heard about the bumps on people's head. We thought in the past, people assumed that it could indicate what your particular specialties were because this is where your brain was biggest, et cetera, et cetera.
It was popular in the 19th century, in the 1800s.
But my favorite personality test before the advent of these modern tests was the nose test. And the British were really into this. The British were really interested in looking at the shapes of your nose and using this to determine your personality. And they had all these glorious names for the various shapes of your noses. Now, today, this seems almost funny and passé, but as a matter of fact, while I was digging up information for this article, apparently this is still quite followed by a number of people in India. All of the modern information I could find about this were for people from India, and from what I understand, people look at nose types and learn about personalities the way a Taiwanese person might think about your blood type. Or
and that's
like
from
your
Japan.
horoscope. Yeah.
Blood type is from Japan.
Isn't that a funny thing?
It is. Okay, let's go on to our third paragraph. In today's digital age, personality tests are more accessible than ever before. So it's really easy to take one of these tests. You can just do it online. Keep in mind that your data will then be given to a company. You've given them permission. They've got it. So if you don't mind that, you may enjoy taking the test and may be able to learn something from the results. In the past, you might have been given a particular test by an employer or a doctor or as part of a study. And I think we used to get these once in a while in school when I was back in elementary school. Now, with the advent of the internet, you can spend hours online testing yourself to discover everything from your leadership style to which superhero your persona most closely aligns with, or also which character and friends you're most like.
That's right. And I got Rachel, and I checked our personality types, Karen, for our superhero persona. Karen and I most identify with Groot, which is from Guardians of the Galaxy. That's the tree guy. I am Groot. Also, Captain America and Doctor Strange. We have very strong morals and principles that are very hard to compromise. And this, I said, okay, yeah, that's definitely me.
Except put us in a situation where nobody sees it, nobody knows about it. We may make compromises.
No.
Really?
Never. You couldn't buy my morals. I would burn your money before I would take it.
Okay, we'll just leave that there for now. Okay, the last paragraph.
All right, of course, most online tests are meant merely for fun, and people treat them as such.
And keep that in mind. Actually, it's mainly entertainment. And why do we love taking them so much? Because we want to be seen, we want to feel that somebody else acknowledges our presence. And this test shows that somebody has observed something about us. And that's very flattering, and it makes us feel good.
And it's really fun to compare yourself to your friends' characters, and you get to make jokes about that. It's a fun social thing.
I'd like to hear more about your colleagues' test results.
Oh, that definitely day 2. Here we go. Yet even tests that have been scientifically developed and approved have their limitations.
Always keep that in mind. They really are very, very limited. They only test you on a few things that the test creator happened to think of, and we've all got many, many blind spots.
Our next sentence. In the U.S., judges have ruled that certain personality tests discriminate against some workers, such as those with disabilities.
So if there's anybody who has a life experience different from the person who creates the test and different from the people the test creator happens to have in their social circle, they're probably just not going to think of it because they have no reference point. And so people with disabilities have traditionally been quite invisible. People, they don't go out as much. They stay at home, and people don't associate with them much because they think, I can't really connect with this person. So their needs are often not addressed in many areas, including tests.
Be careful of the word disability. Some people prefer the term differently abled. Let me say that again.
Right.
Differently abled. It's a phrase you may see sometimes in American media, especially.
And they probably won't say a disabled person. They may say a person with a disability, and that's different.
I agree. Let's continue. In addition, researchers have found that some assessments may lead people to draw conclusions that are not accurate.
So the test may tell you that you're a certain kind of person, like you're really pushy and rude. Where did they get that idea? It's probably all wrong.
So, and then they throw the table and punch you in the face?
Whatever. So don't take it too seriously.
All right, let's continue. In other instances, an over-reliance on the results of personality tests may cause people to overlook weaknesses or strengths not indicated in the results. And that's that phrase, je ne sais quoi. What is that special something this person has?
There is something valuable in every human being. So just because somebody is not good at English or math or computers or social skills or whatever, they absolutely have a lot of things that are really valuable. So don't just judge people on the usual ways or by the usual ways that we judge people. Everybody has their own wonderful thing about them, their own strength. And it's true that a lot of these tests will not give accurate readings for people who belong to minorities because the person who created the test very likely was white and male, and they just don't know the experience of growing up as a minority. That's it for today. That's all we have, but we have a lot more about tests to come tomorrow. Make sure to tune in then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.